welcome to Eye on Horror, the official podcast of iHorror.com. This is episode 127, otherwise known as season 7, episode 8. I am your host, James J. Edwards, and with me, as always, is your other host, Jacob Davison. How you doing, Jacob?
Sleepy. It's June gloom, so it's like not even really daylight out, even though it's the morning.
Yeah, but it's still pretty early in the morning. We're doing this.
Yeah, that too.
Yep. Scheduling with three people is a little hard. Speaking of three people, also with us as always is your other host, John Correa. How you doing, Correa?
Your favorite third wheel. I'm doing pretty good.
We're a tricycle.
Yeah. More like one of those two wheels in the front, one wheel in the back type of motorcycles, like what Kenny Powers rides, eastbound and down.
But let's jump into it. The big release this week, and I know all three of us have seen it, is In a Violent Nature.
Yes.
Yep.
What do you guys think of In a Violent Nature?
Oh, I loved it.
I did too.
It was one of the most entertaining slasher movies I've seen theatrically in some time, and it was just very inventive because the whole shtick is that it's kind of a Friday the 13th, The Burnings backwoods slasher movie, but you're mostly following the killer. So it's a lot of silence and a lot of buildup, but when shit goes down, people get killed, it is insane and over the top. Like there was one particular kill where a guy in the audience actually yelled, "Jesus Christ, stop!"
I know the one with the girl who was doing yoga, right?
Yeah, the yoga one.
That's the thing. The kills in this are so brutal, and I was thinking to myself, it's kind of like the bear attack in The Revenant, or the sexual assault scene in I Spit on Your Grave, where like you're just going, okay, she's fucking dead. Stop.
Yeah, I've also seen some comparisons to Terrifier.
Oh yeah. It's like that. It's like, dude, you made your point. She's dead. Oh my God.
But the difference with this film and those is because it is from the killer's perspective. So much of it, you're just sitting in the moment because it won't cut away too much. And that's one of the things I really appreciate, because it really does come off like a Friday the 13th sequel from the killer's perspective. And then so it's like, all right, so what's that like? Well, there's a lot of cardio. There's a lot of walking, but with that, there's no fancy editing cutting around like the special effects or around the kill. So it's not like boom, boom, boom. It's all right. He's dragging the body, and now you're in the moment. You're in the violence, and it's so much more unsettling that way. Because even the kills that aren't that like over the top or crazy, you're in it. And so you have to sit with it. And I think that's so powerful when you do that with violence and do it in a way where it's not flashy, where it's not showing off or anything, where it's like the reality of it kind of sits with you even more. And I think especially the wood splitter scene.
Oh yeah.
That's the other one where you're just going, dude, he's dead already.
It's just one angle. There's not much cuts or anything, and you're just sitting there and you're like, aren't you supposed to be doing something else right now, bud? Like, why are you still fucking with this body?
That's the thing. If you've ever wondered what Jason is doing when he's not stalking and slicing up, campers, this movie shows you. He's just kind of cruising around in the woods until he finds someone to stalk and slice. And the thing is, it is, like you said, it's a bunch of long takes, and it's not really from the killer's point of view so much. It's not like Maniac, the Maniac remake, where you're seeing it through his eyes. The camera is like, it's almost like a third person shooter where the camera's behind him and you're just kind of following him around, but he's in every scene, the killer is. And so and there's these long takes, there's very little editing in that regard, and there's no music. There's no score at all. So like you said, there's a lot of silence. And I think I saw it in the perfect possible way because it was a theatrical showing. There were only maybe 10 other people, if that. It might have been like 6 or 8 in the theater. So I got to see it on a big screen in the dark, and everyone was dead quiet, except there was one kill where people laughed, which is inevitable in a slasher movie. But the silence and the atmosphere it's vital to this movie. It's better without a score. which I will never ever say that, but I will in this case.
And there's a few kills where they do go over the top, and it is a bit. There's a couple of really silly moments, but it's perfect that way, because I was really terrified when that first trailer came out. I was really scared of, like, because everyone's like, "Oh, we finally get an elevated horror slasher film," and you guys, we all agree how much we hate the term elevated horror, and so my initial thought was, I don't want that. I don't want this. I saw a few reactions from friends that really enjoyed it. And I saw one friend of mine who just said, it's a classic slasher from a different perspective.
Yeah.
And I went, all right, I'll give it a shot. And that's clearly what it, everything about it was not by the books, but it was in that world, just that simple thought of, we're going to do it from the killer's perspective. How do you do that without doing like a monologue? Like, there was no, oh no, they took my mom's necklace, I gotta go get. No, it was just by the camera, how it was shot, and it was done so well.
And the exposition, the way that they lay out, you still learn about the killer's mythology because of what he overhears from the and it feels like a lost Friday the 13th movie. It's a complete Friday the 13th burning, Final Terror ripoff. It is a bunch of, not teenagers, they're older than that, but a bunch of young people in the woods and a killer stalking them and killing them. It is a formula slasher. It's the perspective that's what's different. And the thing is, the approach is elevated, like you say, and like you said, we hate that word, but it is a slasher, and the kills are. Chris Nash, the director, is a special effects guy, so the kills are, buckets of blood and guts in this movie.
Although I wouldn't even call it a ripoff, because it is clearly, paying homage to those films. While I also think it did a good job of kind of establishing its own mythology, because we do hear the whole backstory about the killer, whose name is Johnny. So just setting itself apart from that. But it just kind of takes a lot of those traditional elements from those summer camp slasher campfire stories type things, and I really also want to emphasize how much I like the aesthetic of the killer, because the whole thing with the old school fire mask and the signature weapon with the tree lumber chain hooks and the axe, I feel like that was a good combo. So it did a great job of showing what it was drawing from while still standing on its own.
Oh yeah, I mean, I was comparing it to that rash of Friday the 13th ripoffs that came out in the 80s.
Oh, of course.
I don't know that it kind of is a ripoff, but it's kind of, like you said, it's more of an homage, because it feels like it could have been from that era of
and Lord knows we're not getting an actual Friday the 13th anytime soon. So I enjoyed the hell out of this.
What do you mean we're not getting a Friday the 13th soon? Aren't there's definitely no problems with the rights there.
Which is funny too, because of the timing, because Sean S. Cunningham even said, like, it's going to probably be a few years before we ever see a Friday the 13th thing, because they want a big budget for it or something. And then you see something like this, which was made, clearly on a wing and a prayer and Canadian grant money, and it just goes to show that there's no beating the traditional formula where you get a bunch of people out in the wilderness and a killer and a bunch of gore, and boom, you got it.
Well, even the good Friday the 13th, the original Paramount ones, those were dirt cheap.
Oh,
so, you don't need a big budget in fact, a big budget probably would make it start looking like Freddy versus Jason, too slick, for a Friday the 13th movie.
You know what I was really happy about? It wasn't meta. I was
that too.
I'm a bit over meta. At least in lazy meta. I should clarify. I'm over the laziness that can happen with that. And I swear, if there was one bit where someone went, "Oh, this is like one of those slasher films," I would have walked out. Like I'm over it.
It would have been so easy for them to do that in this movie too. So this is like a horror movie, But you're right. They didn't, about as meta as it gets. Is it, there's it basically is a scene out of, was it Friday the 13th Part 3 where they basically catch you up with them sitting around the fire. That scene is straight out of that, where they tell his mythology. But even then, they don't say, and it's like he's a horror movie villain. They just say, here's what this guy does.
I dug stuff like that. Like they had the whole backstory said by a campfire, like it's a campfire tale, and everyone's like, no way. And they're like, well, I don't know. And then like later on, you've encounter someone who encountered him one of the previous times he came back and was a survivor. And it's like, oh, so this is straight up a sequel. I love it. So it's, yeah. In a Violent Nature was just so much fun and was really great. Nice fresh.
You're all. This is the sequel. So are we going to get an In a Violent Nature prequel?
Who knows? Maybe we'll get a sequel to this sequel.
A sequel to the sequel. It does, not to spoil anything, but it does leave it open in traditional slasher movie style. Jacob also saw something that I really, really, really want to hear about.
Oh yeah, I was at a secret screening at the Aero Theater that turned out to be for the upcoming Oz Perkins movie Longlegs, starring Nicolas Cage and Micah Monroe. Also, interestingly enough, I saw in the credits that Nicolas Cage also produced the movie, so it just really puts things in a perspective.
Hell yeah. That's awesome. If you spoil any plot details,
I
will rage.
It's like, I want to hear about this, but I don't want to hear about this.
Oh yeah, no, don't worry. I won't. I won't spread a single detail about it. Yeah, in fact, I don't even really want to talk about the plot so much, because the marketing for Longlegs has been brilliant in how minimalist it's been. Just they've done those weird little teasers with like the Bible verses and the cryptic imagery, and it does kind of paint a picture of what kind of movie this is, because it is very much nightmare logic. It's a bad dream on celluloid, and I really like that type of thing, because ostensibly it's about FBI agents after a serial killer, but it's more than that.
Does it use the T-Rex song that they've been quoting in the email pushes for the Bang a Gong to dress in black, don't look back? Okay.
Yes, it does use the band T-Rex in the soundtrack. So
cool.
That is a point. Also, just again, without going into it too much, I think this might be Nicolas Cage's most disturbing role, or horrifying. Again, I don't want to get into it too much, but it has been weighing on me. It has been something I've been thinking about a lot, especially in his appearance, which again hasn't really been shown in the trailers or teasers, and just his mannerisms. It's hard to describe. But yeah, it scared the hell out of me. Like there were parts that made me jump in my seat. I screamed. It does have some amazing setups and scares.
A few years ago, when Wild at Heart came out on Blu-ray through Shout, a friend of mine was like saying, "Oh, that's when Nicolas Cage was making interesting movies." And I almost feel like the last few years, Nicolas Cage has been like challenge accepted, because he's doing, things like Dream Scenario and like, the immeasurable, the unbearable weight of massive talent. Yeah. He's been making really cool stuff the last few years, and I can't wait to see Longlegs.
Yeah, and last year you got to be Dracula in Renfield.
Yeah, Dracula. We've seen him as a vampire, though.
I'm a vampire.
Yeah, no, he does make a good vampire.
I'm a vampire.
Yeah. But yeah, no, like Longlegs is legit one of the scariest movies I've seen this year, and Oz Perkins does amazing stuff, especially with just creating a sense of dread, just very, very unease while watching his works, because I still haven't seen Gretel and Hansel, but I did see The Black Coat's Daughter, and I feel like it's kind of not exactly a similar style, but it's like a friend of mine reviewed The Exorcist and talked about how scary it was because it just feels like a movie that is evil. And I feel like that's the similar situation with Longlegs. Like watching it did feel like I was watching something that was exuding like the essence of evil. It was very haunting.
What's Nick Cage's quote in Mandy about evil?
Crazy evil.
Crazy evil. Or, yeah.
Yeah, crazy evil.
But anywho, it's not a new movie, but it was a first time watch for me. I finally watched The Manchurian Candidate from 1962. Holy shit. That movie rules. Like it's still sitting with me days later. I mean, John Frankenham was on some next level shit with that. I couldn't believe. I don't know what Janet Leigh was doing in that movie. That was insane. That when Janet Leigh first meets Frank Sinatra on the train, that whole scene is insane. That's insane. No one talks like that. And it just, yeah. Manchurian Candidate. I mean, it's a story of brainwashed soldiers and government conspiracy. It's got Frank Sinatra, Lawrence Harvey, Angela Lansbury, who just ate it like every scene. And of course Janet Leigh, but my goodness, I just the camera work in that, and how everything played out. It's been a really long time since I've sat in a movie and had like my jaw open, drooling, just going, what, like genuinely like get me. So yeah, I mean, if you haven't seen Manchurian Candidate, I mean, it's 1962. What took you so long? What took me so long? If you have seen it, I give it a rewatch, man, because there's some like really good stuff cooking in there. Like damn, and that new Kino 4K is absolutely gorgeous. So highly recommend.
Speaking of old movies, since you did Manchurian Candidate, I have been working my way through Cinema Speculation by Quentin Tarantino. Okay. And I'm kind of savoring it. I'm going through it little by little, kind of like you were saying that that you don't want to watch the last season of Ash versus Evil Dead because then it's over. I'm savoring this just a chapter or two at a time. And what he does is he goes through and he talks about movies that formed him. And one of them is Dirty Harry. And I realized as I was reading about it, I had never seen the original Dirty Harry, like Sudden Impact and, some of the other Harry Callahan movies. So I put it on. It's a serial killer movie.
Yep.
I mean, he's basically going after what would be the Zodiac killer, I guess.
Yeah, they even call him the Scorpio killer.
Yeah, they call him Scorpio. And it is, I mean, and this is the movie where not Make My Day, but the Do You Feel Lucky Punk? And all the excitement. I actually forgot myself. Did I shoot 6 times or 5? But it is the thing is at the time Tarantino goes into this where it was seen as fascist, and you're looking and watching it in today's climate of like corrupt cops and, basically above the law cops, you can see how it can be seen as fascist even back then, because Dirty Harry does nothing by the book in trying to catch this killer, nothing by the book. But it also, even going not by the book, he ends up failing. It's like at one point there's this 14-year-old girl who's kidnapped, and I don't want to spoil for people who haven't seen it, but he fails at that mission. Yeah. Even though he's literally torturing people to try to find out what he needs to know. But yeah, it's a pretty prescient movie.
It's one of those ones kind of like Electric Glide in Blue. I don't know if you guys have seen that. It's a motorcycle cop movie from the 70s as well. It's almost kind of like the Motorcycle Cop Easy Ride version of Easy Rider, where it is much more like right leaning, but there's some like really interesting stuff in there where like easily that and Dirty Harry, you could just go, that movie's fascist. But then like in watching how like things play out and like really like the almost tragedy of these, it's interesting because like, yes, on its surface, it could be viewed as that. Like Dirty Harry could be viewed as that. But then there's also, like you said, he keeps failing at it because he is doing all that stuff. And so it's kind of like, it's like when film bros are like, Fight Club, yeah, macho, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, dude, that movie's like anti-masculinity. That's the whole point.
And also in Dirty Harry, it's like, not only does he fail while using these fascist tactics, he also gets reprimanded. Like at one point, he does something that's completely against the book. And then he takes his badge and he throws it because he's like, okay, well, I'm no longer a by the book cop. So I mean, and his superiors are always like, even if this guy confessed, he'd walk because of you completely threw the procedure out the window, So
Yeah.
I mean, Dirty Harry is a fascist character, but the movie itself, I don't think is, because he faces repercussions, which is something that regular cops don't really ever do.
It's the Rambo effect. It's that you have this character that has a very clear message in the first film that totally gets obliterated with the sequels as they embrace like the other side of it. Yeah.
Speaking of older films, I rewatched the original 80s canon films Masters of the Universe movie, and it held up surprisingly well.
Is that the Dolph Lundgren?
The very same.
Is He-Man? Yeah.
With Frank Langella in the role of a lifetime as Skeletor.
Frank Langella's Skeletor, yeah.
Yeah, no, they played it at CinMag Void the last or second to last week of May, and I don't think I'd ever watched it in full. I'd like catch bits and pieces on TV that they'd rerun, but it's legit a lot of fun. And I'm not that attached to He-Man as a series of franchise, whatever. So, I don't know all the lore or whatever, but on its own, it was really entertaining because it's just kind of a, like fish out of water, like He-Man and some of his allies have to go to Earth to get a key, like a magic key. And there's some cool fight sequences, and the real star of the show is like the set pieces with Castle Grayskull, because they got like Frank Langella Skeletor on this big ass throne with all these stormtroopers and stuff.
Hell yeah.
And they actually had the production designer there, William Stout, and he was talking about like it was so impressive that like all these big Hollywood producers and directors would go to the set just to get their picture taken on Skeletor's throne. And it just goes to show that like this is the movie that kind of bankrupted canon films, but what a way to go out on, because it did a decent job of the adaptation by just like getting to the core of it, just having He-Man and a bunch of characters from the show fight, and they just kind of thread that line. Although it had a lot of the typical canon staples with like cops and explosions and car chases. So
yeah.
it was a fun blend. It played well with the crowd.
It does slow down a bit when it gets to Earth,
True.
But those pieces when they're in it, is it Etheria or
Eternia?
Eternia, there we go. Are amazing. And shout out to Meg Foster as Evil Lynn. She is incredible in it. And
her eyes are haunting.
Always. I do have a action figure of Frank Langella's Skeletor sitting behind me.
Nice.
It's so camp and fun, but I did not grow up on He-Man, but that He-Man show on Netflix that Kevin Smith produces is really good. Masters of the Universe Revelations. I haven't watched the second part yet, but that it is really Mark Hamill as Skeletor. Get the fuck out of here. That's incredible.
Mark Hamill is he's such a great voice actor.
Oh, especially a Skeletor, dude. He is just chewing every single word, every line, just really, really going to town on it. It is, his Skeletor is great. And Sarah Michelle Gellar plays the lead in it, not He-Man, because it's less about He-Man, the first series of it. But yeah, I highly recommend it. The animation's incredible.
Yeah, no, and then again, that's why I love the live action one, because Frank Langella is just having a ball playing He-Man, like just yelling, "Let this be our final battle," and just when you're playing a guy named Skeletor, you don't hold back, you go 110%.
Well, let's go from canon films to our topic, because it seems to segue pretty well. We should have done this last episode, but the interview with Kairi, which was an awesome interview, by the way, it's Charlie Clouser level. If you haven't listened to our last episode, you should. But since we recorded 2 episodes ago, Roger Corman passed away. And Roger Corman, the cinematic landscape will be so different if Roger Corman had never been around, because so many of the master filmmakers from today, Coppola, Scorsese, Ron Howard, Joe Dante, Jonathan Demme, all these guys started out with Roger Corman. And there's a hilarious bit in the Roger Corman documentary that I know Korea is going to talk about later, where Ron Howard is talking about making Grand Theft Auto, and they're disagreeing over the number of extras in a scene. And Roger Corman says, well, look at it this way, Ron. If you make this movie and it's a hit, you never have to work for me again.
And he didn't.
Yeah, exactly. He went on to make it, Apollo 13 and what was it, Solo? That was the Star Wars movie he made.
Yeah.
He just he moved on. But yeah, Roger Corman, they call it the Roger Corman Film School. And so many of the big players today went through him. So we're going to spend the last half of today's episode talking about Roger Corman.
I was lucky because last year, the Aero Theater, in part with Beyond Fest, did a tribute to Roger Corman and actually had him at the theater with a lot of his quote unquote students. Let's see, Alan Arkush was there, Joe Dante was there, Ron Howard was there, Amy Holden Jones, John Davison, and it was moderated by Mick Garris. And they played Rock and Roll High School, Grand Theft Auto, Piranha, and The Raven, a lot of the movies that these guys started with. And it was one of the most incredible panel Q&As I had ever seen. Like, just everybody was glowing on Roger and talking about his methods, because whatever criticism you can have for his movies or style, like, he always came in on top. Like, he always delivered on those films and was very effective in doing so.
During that panel that he was there with all those people, did all the other people talk more than him?
Oh, no. I mean, like, Roger did talk quite a bit. Like, he did respond to questions or like to anecdotes that they were bringing up.
Because I saw him at Comic-Con probably, 15 years ago at this point. And his wife actually did who is his producing partner, Julie Corman. She's not just Roger Corman's wife. She's she's a vital part of his studio as well. She did most of the talking for him. And I had a feeling that, not that his mental capacities weren't there, but almost like when I saw Stop Making Sense, there was a Q&A moderated by Spike Lee afterwards. And for 4 performers, they sure didn't want to talk. The only one who felt comfortable talking was the drummer, Chris Franz. The other 3 seemed to want to push the questions off to other people. And I got the feeling that maybe Roger Corman was kind of like that, where he didn't really like doing interviews. So he let everybody else in the panel talk.
Well, no, I mean, he did speak quite a bit in that one. Like, I remember in particular, Amy Holden Jones, who did Slumber Party Massacre, talked about her experience working with him. And, they were talking about how, like, the advice that he told her, it was something like, damn, I forget the exact quote, but it was something like, you can make it scary, but it also has to be entertaining. And yeah, no, like, the panel is also available on YouTube. Like, you could find it online, and I would definitely recommend watching it just because it's such an incredible who's who of that era of Hollywood. But no, he was fair. He was pretty cognizant at that panel. That was September of last year, and he was 98. Like, he managed to really make it far. So, good on him for that. And yeah, no, I mean, and the scheduling was so good too, because again, it was Rock and Roll High School, Grand Theft Auto, Piranha, The Raven. The former 3 were the first movies that a lot of those directors started out on, and The Raven is a fun movie from the legendary Corman Poe cycle, where Corman adapted several Edgar Allan Poe stories. And yeah, I mean, it's just really a testament to how Corman was able to work with stars old and new. Because the biggest one I go back to often, and that is probably one of my favorite movies that he produced, and was, a movie that got this director's career off the ground, Peter Bogdanovich's Targets. Like, it is incredible just how that project came together and how it ended up. Because basically, Bogdanovich was assisting Roger Corman, and they had Boris Karloff for a few extra days of filming after the other movie, The Terror, and Bogdanovich put the script together and Karloff loved it so much, he actually did, I think, like an extra day or two just to help get it made. And I've seen Targets a few times in theaters, and it always is still so relevant and so powerful, to the point that Criterion, put out a Blu-ray of it just last year. And it's a project we would not have had if not for Roger Corman. And even though it is under, like a minimal budget and with minimal time, it just goes to show that kind of pressure cooker film school really created results.
I love Boris Karloff. Like if you see if you see him in the roles where he actually gets to quote act, like away from Frankenstein's monster and the Mummy.
Yeah.
He is an amazing actor, but he was such an imposing presence that they cast him as monsters a lot of the time. But I mean, when he can actually, spread his wings and act, he's incredible.
Yeah, no, I mean, like in Targets, I think it might be one of his best roles ever, and it was one of his last, because it was really ahead of its time in that it was metatextual, with having Karloff playing a sort of bitter horror actor who's on his last legs, and comparing the real life violence of that time in the 60s with assassinations and there were some mass shootings, or the sniper attacks back then, and Vietnam. So it was just kind of an amazing reflection of the real life violence at the time, and that still permeates today against the fictional horror by comparison. And it just really goes to show that the Corman school worked, because it was just giving up and comers a chance to creatively flex their legs and find their grounding. And without Targets or Roger Corman, we may not have had the illustrious career of Peter Bogdanovich.
I'm curious to see, Roger Corman's been doing this since the 50s, and I'm curious to see, because you guys are a lot younger than I am, what was the first movie that you saw that you can remember as being a Roger Corman movie?
Oh, I got this. I feel like this is more in loving tribute, but I watched a lot of Mystery Science Theater 3000, and a bunch of his movies ended up on there. Particularly, the one that comes to mind would be It Conquered the World. The one about the, kind of space carrot with the toothy face who like has mind control powers and is trying to take over the world. And like, I've heard mixed things about like whether Corman approved or not of the movies being on Mystery Science Theater 3000. Although more of his movies did end up in the last few years on the Revival, Netflix, and other seasons. So I think he softened up about it. But yeah, no, like a bunch of his movies were varying quality, especially the kind of B movie sci-fi stuff. So I distinctly remember a lot of that from Mystery Science Theater. Oh, and also just that It Conquered the World in particular was a favorite movie of one of the greatest musicians of our time, Frank Zappa. He even did a whole song about it with that one, The Cheapness.
How can you look at a movie like Creature from the Haunted Sea, and not picture that on Mystery Science? I mean, I imagine Corman had to have softened up and embraced the role of this B movie god, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh man, I don't know about as like the first, like I'm watching a Roger Corman movie, I'd say one of the try to remember earliest memories I have of a movie that was a Corman film was watching. I got like a 99-cent DVD from Ocean State Job Blocks. They used to have DVDs in these paper sleeves. They were horribly printed public domain films, but it was of The Terror. And I just remember being so fucking confused by that movie, thinking here's this horror film and it's got Boris Karloff and Jack Nicholson in it. Oh man, it's going to be the scariest thing ever. And then just being bewildered by it as a kid. But the one where I was like, this is Corman and this is what this guy does was Death Race 2000. I was about 13 or 14 and I got the DVD, which I think I still have. But it just blew me away because I went into it thinking man, this is adult wacky racers. And I wasn't wrong. It is adult wacky racers. That's what that movie is. It is a cheesy, fun movie but at its core, there was like this really delicious and fantastic subtext, and sometimes not even subtext of social commentary that was happening in that movie. That was just like, holy shit, that's what you can do with this. You can be entertaining and say something. And that was one of the cool things about Corman. And especially if you do watch the documentary Corman's World, which I always highly recommend as like a nice introduction or a nice refresher to what he's done his work, is he super came up in the B movies, and that's understandable. But he quickly learned how to make something that makes money. And one of the ways of doing that is by doing it as cheap as possible. But when you do things as cheap as possible, you learn how to do things very efficiently. Nothing is wasted. And it was really interesting revisiting Corman's World when they were talking about The Intruder, which was the movie that him and his brother produced on their own because no one would touch it, where William Shatner plays a white supremacist that goes from New York to the South. And they were talking about like how important it was, how terrible the shoot was, because again, you're making a movie about segregation down in the South in the 60s. Like they had to run from location. They were driven out of locations, motels. They were getting threats, all this, and it bombed. But it's a phenomenal film. I went on eBay and found an out of print DVD of it as I was watching it, because I need to revisit it. But that film taught him, all right, cool. Make sure to have the entertainment, because in order to say anything, you have to have the entertainment at the front. And, you know, we talk about like how he gave a lot of young filmmakers a chance who then went on to become, you know, powerhouses on their own. But he didn't just like go, hey, here's a little bit of money, go make this thing. He really was there for them. He made sure as a producer that they had what they needed, that they were getting it done in time, showed them the ropes on how to do it. Martin Scorsese talked about how his experience in Boxcar Bertha enabled him to make Mean Streets, and that he employed a lot of Corman's go-to crew for that movie so that he could make it on time and under budget, or on budget, I should say. And I think that's incredible, because it's more than just going, hey, here's 25 grand, go bring me back a movie. Showing people how to do it is massively important too. And without that, we wouldn't have so many amazing voices.
He also had an eye for talent, I think, because not only behind the camera, but you know, he gave Jack Nicholson his start. He gave De Niro his start.
Yeah.
You know, and the whole relationship between De Niro and Scorsese probably can be traced back to Corman.
Boxcar Bertha, yeah.
So, I mean, he definitely, he's, I don't think it's just luck that he was able to come up with all this young talent. For me, the first movie that I remember seeing that was a Roger Corman movie, and I'm not sure if I knew that it was a Roger Corman movie at the time, was Battle Beyond the Stars.
Ooh, and yeah,
this was in theaters because at this time I was everything Star Wars with, you know, as a kid. So when this movie came out, I'm like, oh yeah, you know, I mean, I didn't realize it was a ripoff of the Magnificent Seven, you know, in space. All I saw was cool aliens in spaceships, you know, fighting, and it was awesome. And then the first one I think I saw that I realized was Roger Corman. I recognized the name, was Galaxy of Terror, which came out the same year. I saw it a few years later. On like one of those USA Up All Night kind of a things. And I remember thinking I dreamt it because I didn't catch the name. And I went years not knowing what this movie was. And I'm like, did I dream that movie? And I'm like, and if I did, I should write this down because I should make a movie out of this. But then years after that, I saw it again. I'm like, oh no, this is that movie I thought I dreamt.
This is the best ideas were already made because you fell asleep with the TV on.
Yeah. And I will say Corman did have a particular knack for following the trends, especially I would probably look fondly on the run from the late 70s to the early 80s, where he did a lot of Alien riffs, with the irony being that, you know, James Cameron, who would go on to do Aliens, got to start doing production design for Corman on movies like Galaxy of Terror.
And he also directed Piranha 2.
That too, The Spawning, which was such a troubled production that it gave Jim Cameron such bad nightmares. He had the nightmare about the Terminator, and that's how we got the Terminator.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure if it was necessarily a troubled production, but he was just so stressed out, trying to make Piranha the Spawning that he had terrible nightmares about a robot from the future trying to kill him. So he was inspired to make Terminator, and the rest is history.
Even in the subconscious, Corman is influencing.
That's the thing too. Is
he's everywhere.
You got to remember that Corman was directing and producing since the 50s up until just even, I think he only slowed down like 5 years ago. Really?
As a producer, yeah.
Yeah.
I think he stopped directing maybe in the 90s or 80s, but he, as a producer, his studio, yeah, he was, and like you said, he wasn't just a here's your money producer. He was hands on. So, yeah, he worked probably 5 different decades.
Yeah, and each one like that. The reason why he's so influential, and the reason why he has made produced nearly 500 films is because he went through different eras. He never stopped changing. So like in the 50s, he was young, run and gun, make movies cheap on his own. And then through the 60s is when he started to because he got the process done, he wanted to make something more. And that's where you got the Poe adaptations, which were like masterfully made. But even then, they kept saying we want you to keep doing this. And he was like, I don't really want to keep doing this, which is why the later ones like The Raven get real cheesy and fun with it, because they wanted to have fun with the material and do something different. Like he was always looking to during those eras, he was very ahead of the time. And it was in Making the Trip, which again, making films about the counterculture of the time was not really a thing during that time. So when they made The Trip, the distributors were worried that they were making a pro-drug movie. And so they changed the ending without him telling him. And that's when he was like, you know what? He made the decision, I could keep doing this. I could keep making stuff for other people at this higher budget. Fuck that. I'm going to start my own studio, my own production company and distribution company. And he basically had to take a step back and go back to making lower budget things, even though he was getting up to the mid tiers. And thank God he did, because he was able to do things on his own, able to get so many careers going, and made some really amazing stuff. I mean, I'll be forever thankful that this guy gave Penelope Spheris a chance and produced Suburbia. That film hit so close to heart. I mean, making punk movies, come on. He was ahead of the curve with that between Suburbia and Rock and Roll High School. Get the fuck out of here.
Yeah. Well, and also, he allowed Slumber Party Massacre to be made. And that, like you're saying, following the trends. I mean, that's a slasher movie that essentially made fun of slasher movies.
Yeah. Essentially, it eviscerated them.
Yeah, it was going to be more of an outright parody originally. I mean, it was written by a feminist author.
But he gave that chance. He was like, all right, cool. As long as you can include these notes. I need these things. I need this amount of explosions. I need this amount of ass. I need these things that will help me sell the thing. If you can do that, and you can do that on budget, it's yours. I think it was Joe Dante even said that. He was like, we needed those points, but everything in between that, we could do what we wanted as long as it was done on time. And yeah, it's also really interesting in the documentary. They do highlight the vast difference of these filmmakers that were coming out in the 70s, because you had the Roger Corman school kids, and then you had the film school kids of Lucas and Spielberg, who were essentially getting big budgets to do Corman films. Jaws, Star Wars, that was all stuff that Corman and them were doing. And he even said, he was like, that was almost the death of us. That's how we were viewing it, because now studios are making big budget versions of what was our bread and butter, and we can't compete with those budgets. And that's where you get creative. That's where you go more insane, or that's where you do more stuff, or you make a few that are just straight up ripoffs just to get the money, for the next one. And that's business. It's so incredible what an amazing, insane life that man did. Like, you cannot really grasp the massive impact that man has had on cinema. And over the course of 50, that's half the life of this medium that this man has influenced.
Oh yeah, he probably more, because he started in the mid 50s.
Yeah.
And he was working. I mean, I don't know how much work he did in the last few years, but I mean, he at least executive producing like the Sharktopus movies, you know. So yeah, he was, I mean, out of the 100 and so years of cinema, yeah, he's been doing it for more than half of them.
Yeah, and I still love that when he was doing the Sharktopus movies, that he specifically got Conan O'Brien to do a cameo in the sequel, Sharktopus versus Terracuda, and it was the first time Conan O'Brien was ever killed in a movie because the Terracuda chops off his head.
Yep. So, what are your favorite Roger Corman movies
that we haven't listed yet?
Sure. I mean, I'll go first, because mine is kind of not typical Corman. A Bucket of Blood is my favorite.
Ooh,
the original Bucket of Blood with Dick Miller. Just because it's not about aliens, or, you know, it's not in space. It's about an artist who it almost seems like a Tales from the Crypt episode. He you know, discovers that he can make art while killing people, basically using like real people as his medium. And yeah, I love it.
Also, it was a funny satire of the beatnik movement.
Oh yeah, totally.
For me, my personal favorite is probably The Mask of the Red Death from the Poe cycle. That one holds a special place in my heart, because I actually saw that around the time I moved to LA at the New Beverly. They did it as a double feature with one of my other favorite movies, Joe Dante's Matinee, and they actually had Corman and Joe Dante there to talk about the movies and kind of how they reflected each other. Plus, Mask of the Red Death, you know, it's hard to compare all of them, but I think it might be the best of the Corman Poe Price cycle, because Vincent Price's Prince Prospero might be one of his best villain roles. He is just pure evil in that movie. And
I know the Witchfinder General has a problem with your thesis.
Okay.
But anyway,
agree to okay. Agree to disagree, or, you know, whatever debate. But anyway, and also just it is legit creepy, like all the stuff with the Red Death, and like the imagery is very Euro horror while also being surreal. And yeah, it's just very entertaining and moody. So yeah, Mask of the Red Death, if you need to see any movie from that Poe Corman cycle, that's definitely the one to go with first.
It has the best imagery. It has the most striking imagery from the Poe cycle. Yeah. It's, I mean, and part of it, I mean, just the color red, you know, it jumps off.
Yeah,
the screen,
it did that Euro blood color red, you know, the bright red. It's very, very stylish. Also, it made for a very entertaining watch during lockdown.
Yeah, and we wouldn't have the terror without it, because he went, "Hey, I have these stages over the weekend. Let's shoot something."
Exactly. I do love that method of filmmaking, where if he just had a person for some extra days or some sets for extra days, like, "Hey, let's make another movie while we're at it."
That's how we got The Most Dangerous Game.
Exactly.
They're like, "Oh, hey, we're not using the King Kong sets at night. Let's."
Yeah.
Now that's innovation.
That's how we got Spanish Dracula too.
Exactly.
And in some ways, the superior Dracula.
A lot of people think so, and they wouldn't be wrong.
It's really potato for me, because they're both so brilliant in their own ways. The Spanish Dracula versus Todd Browning's, but that's why I don't say versus, but I love them very dearly. But that
anyway, your favorite Corman.
Yes. Can we do that more often? Can we have like other directors to make the same movie, but like for different audiences using the same sets? That was an incredible experiment that I think should be replicated more often.
It should be.
They did that with that Exorcist sequel, Dominion and the Beginning.
Oh yeah. I mean, didn't they just fire Paul Schrader and then just like bring in
Reddy Harlan?
Yeah. Oh boy.
That's quite that's quite a thing. I
They
mean,
should make a documentary about that.
Oh, jeez.
someday.
Get both those guys in the same room too, Schrader and Harlan.
I feel like that would be insufferable. I mean, favorite Corman, I have to agree with Jacob. Mask of the Red Death is just such an absolutely gorgeous, masterful film. Like, I feel like Corman as like a filmmaker, that was not him at his peak, but that was him at his most powerful. That was him with, you know, the budget, the script, the actors, just everything came together to make such a beautiful film. But at the end of the day, my favorite one has to be the one that like got Corman on my radar as the filmmaker and the legend that he is, and that's Little Shop of Horrors, the original, because it's that classic Corman story of, you know, we wanted to see if we could make a movie in 2 days, and so they just reused the sets from Bucket of Blood. They wrote the script, which was basically Bucket of Blood, but with a killer plan. They shot half the movie in 1 day, the other half in the next, and it works. It works so fucking well. It's so over the top. It's so camp. It knows what it is, but it works phenomenally. And I think it's incredible what one can do in a pressure cooker. I mean, that's one of the things I respect as Corman, as a businessman and a filmmaker, is just that dude loved a challenge, and you see that spirit to this day with like people doing 48-hour challenge. Think about that. People do 48-hour challenges all the time and still can't do something like Little Shop of Horror.
The funniest thing about Little Shop of Horrors is you have the original Roger Corman one, and then the big budget musical, which actually came after the Broadway musical. But it's so, what's funny about it is that they took the Corman one and they still kept the B movie aesthetic of it, but they added these amazing songs and this big budget cast. And so you basically have, like you were saying, like with the USC film school guys coming out, you basically have them doing Corman with a big budget, you know? So, I mean, yeah, Little Shop of Horrors is a story all its own.
Yeah. I love it. It's both movies. I love Little Shop of Horrors. It's incredible.
Well, for those of you who want to catch up on your Roger Corman, there's a ton to choose from, but I do recommend the Corman documentary that Korea is talking about. It is such a sweet tribute to the man, and like these guys that he's talking about. Like if you want to see Jack Nicholson cry, you know, the love that all of these people that whose careers he launched have for the man, is it's called Corman's World. I don't know that we mentioned the name of this documentary we keep talking about.
Possibly. I highly recommend it. It goes on sale on Vudu all the time if you don't find it on a streaming service. But I do think that it's necessary, because we live in a time where Hollywood and film is overtaken by Wall Street and business folks. And rewatching Corman's World, the thing that stuck out to me the most, here's one of the most successful businessmen in film history, and yet that man still never lost his heart with people. Nicholson talks about how Corman, not you think, oh, he put him in one movie and took off. No, like he supported Jack Nicholson for 10 years. Like he casted Nicholson in his first lead in the 50s and still kept like bringing him back. And Nicholson didn't take off until about the 70s. So like, you know, 60s and then 70s. Sorry. But he and other filmmakers say, like, when no one else called, Corman called me and offered me to direct. No one else was calling. And that's what I think is one of the most beautiful things about this man, is that he not only took chances, but he supported people.
He had loyalty. He had loyalty to his people, and in turn, they all had loyalty to him. I mean, I honestly think that if Roger Corman in 2010 had called up Scorsese and said, "Hey, let's make a movie," Scorsese probably would have done it.
Not at the
not at the Corman rate.
not at the not on a Corman schedule. I don't think.
Yeah.
I think that's a bit
true.
much for that's a young man's game.
And also, dude, asking Scorsese to turn in a movie that's less than 90 minutes is like it ain't gonna happen. But maybe a better example would have been if Corman called Jack Nicholson and said, "Hey, I want you to star in this movie." I think Nicholson would have been there. But anyway, if you're not familiar with Roger Corman, check it out. We've given lots of good recommendations here. Or just, you really can't go wrong with anything you can pick by Corman. I mean, that's the other thing. He's, like you said, 500 producer credits, and there's more good than bad. I won't say that they're all gems, mainly because I don't think I probably haven't seen all 500 of them. That's a lot of movies. But yeah, go check out some Corman. And I just want to, echo what I said at the beginning of this. The cinematic landscape would be vastly different if it wasn't for Roger Corman, because so many of the big players today, he jump started them. He trampolined them into what they're doing now.
Yeah.
Yep. No, the film industry would have been a very different and possibly worse place if it weren't for Roger Corman. So, just have to acknowledge and respect what he did. And I'm happy that so many people honored his memory when he passed.
And don't forget that he was the only one distributing Fellini, Kurosawa at a time when no one was investing in distribution of foreign films. Like, this man, he didn't just make schlock. He made sure that, like, the high art was also viewed like this. He was a multifaceted individual.
Absolutely. Yeah. He contributed not only to, I mean, like you said, just the American rights to a lot of these filmmakers that are legends in Europe and Asia. Yeah. Love to Corman. He'll be missed. And his legacy will live on because half of Hollywood got their start with him. All right, let's call this one an episode. Our theme song is by Restless Spirit, so go check them out. And our artwork is by Chris Fisher, so go check him out. You can find us on all the socials under Eye on Horror or at iHorror.com, which is the website that we all call home. And watch some Corman because
never wrong time for it.
You probably already have, but go back and revisit it or find something new. And we will see you in a couple of weeks. So for me, James J. Edwards.
I'm Jacob Davison.
And I'm Jonathan Correa.
Keep your eye on horror.